Hi everyone, and welcome to another Smart Cities Week event. My name is Adam Beck. I'm Executive Director of the Smart Cities Council, and I'm delighted to bring today, this is the first of 3 sessions, our City Encounters case study series. This morning we have a group of 4 fantastic cities that are going to be sharing case studies and lessons learned, and then later on today we'll be having a feature presentation around business continuity with the City of Casey, and then later on today, for those that have registered, we look at more case studies under the theme of impact. Thanks so much for joining us. I just want to start with a few little housekeeping matters, if I can. You're all on mute at the moment. And whilst you're on mute, you can still certainly have a voice, and we encourage you to use that Q&A chat box that you can see up there on the screen. You've got your controls there. We will be having a discussion session, a panel session, after each of our 4 presenters have presented. So please make sure as we go through that you'll pop your questions and comments up there so that I can share those as part of our discussion later on. For those of you that may have colleagues that couldn't join or register today to listen in, we will have a recording of this session up on our YouTube channel by this time tomorrow as well. Just head to YouTube and make sure you go to Smart Cities Council Australia, New Zealand. And of course, you can also see all of our other recordings from Smart Cities Week sessions that have been running since April. So Smart Cities Week has been running since April, as I mentioned. We still have a couple of months to go. For those that haven't been into the website to have a look at the program, I encourage you to do so. A couple more monthly data dialogues coming up. We've got a feature plenary morning in a couple of weeks' time, and there's some other exciting sessions that are coming up. So head to sewaustralia.com to find out more. For those that haven't picked up on our new Smart City Council Partnership ecosystem offering, we've recently launched new categories for membership for those that are interested, particularly those new categories for cities, for startups, and also knowledge and research institutions such as universities. So for those that want to become a member of the Smart Cities Council and enjoy the benefits that we have, you can head to our website and download our partnership packs for either of those or any of those 4 categories that you see up on the screen there. The Smart Cities Academy is part of Smart Cities Week. We're running 2 sessions. The Tuesday the 13th has sold out in October, and October 15th has about 5 seats left. So for those that work within local government, and for Smart City Council partners, a seat at the Academy is free. It's a 1-day intensive, 3 modules, 2 hours each, which deliver, upon successful completion of the assessment items, the Smart Cities Practitioner Certificate. So again, encourage you to head to sewaustralia.com to look at the program there, and all the registration details are on the website. So let's get stuck in today. It's all about case studies. It's all about sharing and lessons learned. We have 4 fantastic speakers that have been around the block many, many times with respect to smart cities. John Hawke from City of Perth, Claire Chaikin-Bryan from Lake Macquarie down in New South Wales, David Edwards from Waverley Council, and from New Zealand we have Michael Healy from Christchurch City Council. Thank you one and all for joining. How this is going to work today is that each of our presenters have 12 minutes. And in that 12 minutes, we're really trying to share in the case study the challenge or challenges that a particular solution was responding to, and of course sharing the outcomes and indeed lessons learned. So that's the format that we're going to be using. I'm going to be keeping time. I will be identifying for each of our speakers when 10 minutes has passed, and when they've got 30 seconds left. So when you hear me coming in over the top, that is purely timekeeping. We want to keep it sort of somewhat short, sharp, and succinct, so that we have plenty of time for audience engagement through the Q&A box. So please make sure that you use that function to to post any questions that I'll use. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand my controls over to John. So let me just stop showing my screen for a moment. And John, I'm going to make you presenter. It looks like everything's gone through on my end. You should receive a few little notifications there, and we should be up and running. We've got you in display mode at the moment, so if you just want to swap that and enlarge it, we will get underway. And once you're underway, I will get the clock running. I haven't started the clock, so that's all right.
Okay. Just going to move myself over to the right screen. Hang on a second. So, can you see my PowerPoint slide at the moment?
No, if you go up to display settings and swap screens, we should hopefully get your other one just up the top of that, the screen that you're in with the slides on it. Yeah, Go to the next one, display settings. If you swap that, hopefully magically your presentation will appear on our screen.
How's that look?
That's looking perfect, John. We've got it up and running. Over to you
Awesome.
for 12 minutes. I'll start the button. Thank you, John.
Morning, everybody. Welcome to a sunny 7:30 in Perth. So I hope you're all great. So the scope of this discussion was really to do a case study, and it's topical, but I wanted to focus on the challenge of COVID and how we help mitigate that in Perth. So the solution is we're going to talk about the technology, the people, and then open data. The outcomes, we'll talk about some reporting and then lessons learned. So firstly, the technology. We were fortunate enough to be trialing a small startup in Perth before COVID, which used very simple Wi-Fi counters as a proxy for activity sensing in the city. Now, a lot of councils have done this. I guess what we did, which was a little different, was our operating model, in that our model was that we were installing these sensors in businesses. So literally on top of fridges, under cash registers, behind bookshelves. We also had a lot of collaboration with other agencies, our town hall, our events people, the concert hall, the theatre trusts, parks. So our model, and we sort of fell into success, was, would you mind terribly if I put this little plastic thing in your shop? The outcome for us was that when COVID unfortunately hit us, and Perth was hardly affected, we need to be very clear with that, that we had this wonderful stream of live data. And we had a lovely connection point in all of our sectors and all of our market segments. So we had retail, Main Street shopping, entertainment, after hours, business districts. The data flowed back through Laura. I'm sure most of you will be familiar with the technology, and then we did most of the advanced analytics in Power BI. So that's the technology. The people piece really connected a very, very wide part of our community, literally small cafe owners all the way through to our major development agencies. One of the key things for us was open data. We made a decision very early that we would provide a live public dashboard so that the businesses, the shopkeepers, and the government stakeholders, as well as the medical community and the police and the Defence Force, would be able to have a visibility in what's going on in the city. So the data streamed on a dashboard, and I'll switch channels here in a second and show you the dashboard, so they could very much interact with what was going on. This is just a little slide on roughly how the technology works. This is not a technology brief, but you get the concept that it's quite localized, they're quite focused. One of the things we liked about this approach is it's good from a privacy point of view. So we were not tracking MAC addresses or names or no facial recognition. So from the point of view of privacy and confidence, that our customers or our stakeholders could be very comfortable that we were looking after. And just a little bit of architecture stuff at the back end. Whilst it looks pretty smooth and easy once it's up and running, there's a lot of moving parts to make it all work and to make it work in the context of our entire smart cities architecture. So I'm happy to share this with other people. The outcomes, we've got this kind of stuff. So we're able to really understand what happened in our city. Now, again, we were very fortunate in Perth, and my heart goes out to our colleagues in Melbourne and Sydney who've been much more severely affected. But even without having many cases in Perth, we had the economic restrictions, and we had a synergistic effect. People stopped discretionary spending, and we could see this in the data right away. We could absolutely follow week by week, and again, the transparency is every other stakeholder is seeing the same information, and they can make their own decisions, their own adjustments to shop hours as they go. The data was rich and real time, so we could slice by business hours, weekends, after hours. We could really look into areas that we wanted to look into. From an outcomes point of view, this then enabled us to have some quite specific discussions about retail hours, free parking. We had some school holidays there, and were our initiatives in the school holidays working? So high resolution data and real-time decisions. For example, we focused on our after hours entertainment precinct, which for us took quite a hit. We were able to look at time of day. So how's the what time of day were the impacts? The lower blue line is sort of the worst of it in August, and then sorry, in April, and then August is current. And I put the November line in there, sort of a comparison to the pre-COVID normal. It wasn't just the Wi-Fi sensors. We were able to look at environmental qualities as well. Didn't find anything, but sometimes it's important that data tells you you don't have a problem. So we didn't have an air pollution spike. We didn't have a water pollution spike. Again, just so that we've got full visibility on everything that's important. I guess the lessons learned for us, just to sort of get to the conclusion, was transparency is important. Just go back to the conclusion slide. So sharing the data was absolutely vital for us. The changes made in our relationships with our stakeholders has been wonderful. We're now a trusted partner. The data is trustworthy. It's accessible. They can go to it at any time. They're not reliant on one person in the loop. And the systems do what the systems do, which is how it should be. Transparency. So we've been very clear about privacy. We've been very open with that. And there's also an obligation. It means that our analysts and our technology people and the people who are running the sensors are required to be fully available, fully committed to the advanced reports that we do on a weekly and now fortnightly basis. And you have to have a good discussion. So we also blended it up with other data. So the open source data, the solution part, we blended in with airport data, other environmental sensors, Google data, TomTom for traffic. So we drew in any other source we thought that would help the narrative, and the narrative is the challenge of how do we mitigate against COVID. So that's the fundamental case study I wanted to present to you. The technology itself wasn't particularly unusual. Many of the other councils have it, and it's available through a number of vendors. But I think our insights is about transparency, openness, and data governance. Happy to take questions. I'm not sure how I'm going for time, Adam. I was talking and not looking at the clock.
John, stellar presenter there. Still a few minutes to go, but that just allows us to add that onto the question time, unless you wanted to add any other points at the moment.
If you'll bear with me, I can jump to the live dashboard if anybody's wanted to have a look at that and maybe show you what that looks like.
Yeah, we wouldn't say no to a live dashboard, John.
All right.
You know what type of audience we are.
I love a good data set in the morning. All right, let's see if I can end the slideshow. There'll be a technical pause once I figure out my screens. How do I go to screen sharing? Sharing. Where is it? There we go. I think you might have it coming up now.
Oh yes, it's up and looking good, John. Thank you.
Okay, so this is the live dashboard, the map, and true transparency. So the red ones are offline. If you're using live data, be prepared to have discussions about a sensor going offline. They get unplugged. Power utilities do things. It happens. So here's some of our live data dashboards. This one here is an area where we have some homelessness concerns. So we have a trigger, a trip on the sensor. So if we get above or below a number, we change our response a bit. This is a retail precinct. Here I've got a different timeline. This is one of our entertainment areas. On other graphs, I also overlay the weather data. So does weather have a change on the sites? This sort of slice here is focused on the tourism narrative. This is our commuter space, our train station, and one of our big public foot traffic thoroughfares. So again, as you can see, we blend and slice and dice the presentation to try and allow different people different insights. And I guess the key point there is I don't know what question they're trying to answer, so I need to present the data so that it's meaningful for a user that I might not meet. This is a different dashboard. So this is our sort of entertainment trust. The Perth Theatre Trust runs 4 or 5 major venues. So for them, we've blended up a slightly different view of the dashboard, and so there you can see the temperature and rainfall chart laid alongside their venues. So again, this is their information. Looks like they had an event on Saturday night. That's kind of cool. Must give them a call. The concert hall was shut for quite. So you can see that green line is the concert hall. So it looks like they've had an event, but it was shut all the way back here. It takes a while to get to know your data, but the story and the narrative and the partnership, the teamwork, I think is most powerful. Data of itself does nothing. It's only if you're sharing it with your colleagues that really helps. Happy to take questions.
Brilliant. John, thank you so much. Coming in at 11 minutes and 48 seconds in a 12-minute case study. No pressure on the other speakers at all. So let's switch gears. Let's head down to New South Wales. David Edwards, I'm about to give you the presenter controls. I'm going to click yes here. You should be in the box seat, and we've got your layout view up on the screen at the moment. If you want to,
can you see that?
Yep, that's perfect, David. Thank you so much. Over to you, and I'll start the timer. Thanks.
Okay, great. Hi everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So I'm going to be just giving a presentation on how Waverley responded to COVID-19. So this is based on the theme of sensing. So the use of sensors, devices, and other data were merged to offer a better insight for Waverley. So just to give you some context, so Waverley is a small local government area in the eastern suburbs of Sydney. So we border the City of Sydney, Randwick and Woollahra councils, but we are only 7 square kilometres in area. So we are very high density we have a population of about 74,000 people. We've got a big transport interchange at Bondi Junction, a big commercial centre at Bondi Junction, and obviously a very tourist orientated area at Bondi Beach. So our LGA includes Bondi, Tamarama and Bronte beaches. So the challenge for us. So no doubt you probably will have seen or heard through media outlets about the problems we faced down at Bondi. So this image you can see was taken from, I think, the 21st of March. So this is a few weeks after the pandemic started becoming quite an issue in our area. And as you can see, social distancing just did not exist at that time. And I think at this time there were restrictions on gatherings of more than about 500 people. So it was it was a major issue for the council. So on the 21st of March, following this picture, we had to close our beaches. And in the following weeks, we had multiple parties that were shut down by police, and Bondi was officially a coronavirus hotspot. So this is a quick timeline of how the events unfolded. So it was emerged as a hotspot on the 5th of March. On the 20th of March, there were strict social distancing measures in place, and then obviously, you saw that picture the day after. On the 1st of April, Waverley Council and St Vincent Hospital opened up a COVID-19 drive-through testing clinic down at Bondi Beach. On the 3rd of April, Bondi, including neighbouring suburbs, recorded the highest number of cases in New South Wales with 95 infections. And 2 days later, that nearly doubled to 159 cases. So within 30 days, it had become a national health crisis. So there were still uncertainties at that time about how the virus could spread. There was a clear lack of visibility by government agencies. The number of cases were escalating, and council had started receiving numerous requests for help from local businesses. And at that time, we were also approached by state government with a request for urgent data around activity in our commercial centres. And so we had to try and come up with a response. So although we did have some data within the organisation, I guess we had technical problems as well in terms of being able to deliver that data. So all our data was, I guess, probably like most councils, stored in disparate systems, stored in silos, very little oversight of that data. There was a lack of knowledge and capability internally in terms of using data. Wasn't in a format that was easily shared, and we had to come up with a way that we could not only provide data to stakeholders, but set up regular data feeds so that it could be kept up to date. So that brings me to the solution. Luckily, Waverley was quite well advanced in our smart city journey, so we implemented quite a number of projects up to this time. And we had a strategy adopted in 2019, which outlined a 4-year program of work, of which the data was a core component of that strategy. So these are some of the, I guess, solutions we had already implemented. So we had public Wi-Fi rolled out across 7 key locations in the LGA, including all our beaches and coastal parks. And the benefits of public Wi-Fi was that it was able to measure the number of mobile devices within our public Wi-Fi network. We had smart parking systems rolled out in 3 of our council car parks in Bondi Junction Commercial Centre, which allowed us to monitor the occupancy rates. And we also had over 42 solar power bins rolled out in our commercial centres in Bondi Beach and Bondi Junction. So the bins allowed us to monitor the volume of waste that was generated at different locations. So although we had those 3 data sets that provide had the potential to provide a bit of insight into the activity and the numbers of people in our commercial areas, our crisis management team were still receiving a lot of inquiries from local businesses wanting support. So we needed to get an idea of, how businesses were impacted. And so we spent a bit of time trying to source financial data and ended up using MasterCard's retail location insights data to help with that. So as I said previously, we didn't have, the capability internally for working with data and data analytics. But luckily, about 6 months prior, I'd touched base with UNSW. So at UNSW, they offer a master's program for city analytics. And I was fortunate in that we had 2 student placements from that master's program that were working with us in working with dashboards. So that was very fortunate timing. So these are some of the dashboards that we created. So this is a dashboard created in Power BI using our public Wi-Fi data. So this is showing, our main locations at Bondi Beach, Bondi Junction, and the other 2 beaches. And it's just showing the trend of the daily counts of people at these areas from the 1st of January up until about mid-July. So the benefit of these dashboards is that they're totally interactive and can be shared with anyone. But as you can see here, around the 21st of March is around here. There was a notable drop, at Bondi Beach from that day forward. So that's when, social distancing and restrictions really were put in place at the beaches. This is an example of the dashboard created for our council car parks. So all 3 of these car parks are in Bondi Junction. And the dashboards represent the average, maximum, and minimum occupancy rates per day. So once again, you can see how the occupancy rates, dropped towards the end of March, and then slowly recovered, more recently in June, July. And lastly, this is an example of our smart bins dashboard. So the top layer is showing our bins in Bondi Junction, and it's showing the volume of waste that was generated per month. And the bottom screen is showing Bondi Beach. So just to give you a bit of insight, so if you look at, say, April in Bondi Junction, you can see in April there was a noticeable drop across the board for all the bins in Bondi Junction. But in Bondi Beach, there wasn't much difference. So it just shows you how, the location can definitely impact on what you're trying to analyze and on the movements of people.
2 minutes to go, David. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, so that was essentially our total solution. So we were able to package that up into these dashboards and provide them to New South Wales government. So we use these insights internally as our crisis management team to help us come up with support packages for local businesses. Like I said, it's important that we use multiple data sources to monitor the changes, and it's been used for informed decision making. So the outcomes were the interactive dashboards. So we're better able to manage council resources in terms of crowd control and management. So using the dashboards, we're able to see what locations would be, I guess, heavily visited based on time of day and location and things like that, and then send resources to better manage those crowds. There's I guess a lot of improved collaboration between local and state government. So we share lots of data now with state government agencies to help them with their decision-making processes as well as for our own internally. And then lessons learned, I guess it shows you the importance of sensors and data feeds. I guess one of the big lessons for us was how data can be merged from a variety of sources, and using a common platform such as Power BI gives you those insights which can then be shared easily. It's quite an advancement for state and local government in sharing these types of data sets in this way. And I guess the biggest thing for us now is real-time data is still the ultimate goal. So although we have quite a valued data set, which we're sharing widely, we're now looking at how we can get real-time data at our beaches for that real-time response for managing crowds in COVID-19 times. So that's the end of the presentation, but yeah, happy to answer any questions as part of the Q&A.
David, thanks so much for sharing that case study. And as David said, please make sure that you load up any questions in the questions box. We've got some good ones coming through that we'll be addressing when we get to the discussion. So look, from one beach and one beautiful part of the world to another, let's head up the east coast to Lake Macquarie. And Claire, I'm going to hand the presenter controls over to you. And hopefully by now you've got the gist of this. I'll let you know when there's 2 minutes to go, when you hit the 10-minute mark. But we're looking forward to your fantastic. It's all up, looking good, ready to go. I'll start the timer. Claire, thank you. Over to you.
Great, thank you. Yes, hi, I'm Claire Chaiken-Bryan. I'm the Smart Cities Lead at Lake Macquarie City Council. We're just north of Sydney and before Newcastle Council. So the challenge. So almost 250 people drowned across Australia in 2018. And we also have a spate of really tragic incidents on New South Wales beaches in 2019, which again highlighted the need for increased awareness around beach safety and dangerous conditions. There's also a major inconsistency in how we collect the data on beaches, particularly around how we make decisions in terms of risk, and also feeding data into resourcing. And collecting and recording data is a really time-consuming thing for lifeguards on our beaches when they should be concentrating on the really important thing, watching the water and saving people's lives. So we really set out with the challenge of, can we make beaches safer, smarter, and better? So the solution was the Smart Beaches project. Smart Beaches project was funded under round 2 of the Smart Cities and Suburbs program from the Australian federal government. Involved over 25 collaboration partners from government, academia, smart cities specialists, artists, entrepreneurs, technology providers, coastal experts, people from across the board. And the project was to be piloted at 4 beaches, 2 on the northern beaches of Sydney, Manly and Shelley Beach, and 2 beaches up here at Lake Macquarie City Council, Redhead and Blacksmiths Beach. The project looked at trying to equip lifeguards with public new safety tools, inform the long-term strategy for beach safety management, hopefully contribute to the future of reducing coastal drownings, raising beach safety awareness, and informing visitor planning and management of beaches. As part of the process on the project, we found out that a lot of the risk management data collection can be automated, things like number of users, beach conditions, weather patterns, and when equipment is being used. So that led us to sensing. Sensing that equipment, sensing what's going on at the beach. So the project deployed a number of sensors. This included GPS tracking of lifeguarding equipment to find out where it was and when it was being used, for example, to indicate when rescues were happening. Sensors in the bathrooms to monitor amenities usage. Cameras to count people on the beach and in the water. Activity monitors on our lifeguards, so smartwatches to see when were there high levels of activity, which was also seen as a possible indicator of when there were busy times happening on the beach. Bin sensors to look at when bins are full. Water sensors on the bubblers to see when people are using that. Also, we drew on existing sensors that were out there. Manly Hydraulics Lab have offshore buoys in place that we were able to access their data through to get real-time data on beach conditions, wave height, frequency, direction, things like that, which is one of the seen as one of the key critical data points for beach risk assessment. So the outcome. So we have developed a number of, as part of the project, a number of dashboards, particularly around automating people counting visitor numbers from our cameras, feeding that into risk analysis and prediction algorithms, having asset tracking, particularly on things like our lifeguard boards, our jet skis, and feeding into automated reporting, so the daily reporting that council lifeguards do, feeding data that's coming out of those systems, things like the information on wave height, frequency, tidal information, weather information, feeding directly into their daily reporting so they don't need to fill out the information, as well as integrating people counting. We're currently working on making our final, sort of consolidating all of this into one dashboard and making it more sophisticated and easier to read, and particularly making it able to be scaled to other beaches and other councils in a really easy to use way. And yeah, we're continuing this summer, we're continuing on, particularly around people counting and cameras. We're going to be doing a lot of analysis this summer, directly comparing numbers that are coming out of human counting versus camera counting to prove the technology is 100% viable as a replacement from the people counting that lifeguards do, so they can eliminate that job completely. We also tried dangerous current signs with flashing lights on them as part of the project. This was another sort of part communication technique, part had a sensor on it just to see where it was. But we had an indication from the public that they were responding to the flashing sign more than a sign without flashing lights. So we're trialing that again this summer as a new way of just making it more visible to people. Hey, yeah, this is a dangerous place to be. The project also worked with an app called Ocean Live, which provides beach safety data and information to the community. And that launched earlier this year. We're hoping to continue our collaboration with them and, you know, with the community being able to access safety information and beyond that, feeding some of our live data into that app as time goes on. Continuing with GPS tracking of our equipment, and we also have a community of practice that's been set up for smart beaches to continue the conversations across the whole industry, share learnings, find opportunities for us to collaborate further and move this technology in space further. And lessons learned. I think we learned a lot of lessons on this project, but I picked the top 3 that really came home for us. So get subject matter experts on early. It was really key for us on this project because it is a very specific situation, particularly around beaches, risk assessment, coastal conditions, to get the right people in the room early on to know what's valuable, what's useful, what even do you need to know to feed into risk assessment. And it was a really interesting process for us because it did come to the conclusion that there isn't a universal agreement out there how to do risk assessment on beaches and exactly what data points are going to be most useful. And we're continuing to look at that as time goes on. What are the minimum data sets you need? So it was a really interesting process for us. It wasn't a clear cut and dry. So on the project, we collected data on lots of different things, just in case something falls out to be more valuable than another. But also, if you think about it, people counting is not just useful for your risk assessment, it's useful for your events team, it's useful, as we've been talking about, for COVID-19. If you collect data, there's often more than one use for it. So I don't think there's a lot of harm if you've got only a small reason for collecting it, but you never know where it's going to go. The other big thing we ran into is tech is often designed and trained for the regular urban environment. It's not designed to go on a beach, for example. Putting things in a really highly corrosive environment like there is in the sea air we lost a couple sensors on the way to that because salt air gets in and corrodes your whole circuit board, and there goes the sensor. So monitoring that is now a job for us, and also people counting. So a lot of people counting using camera image analytics is based on machines that have been trained in an urban environment. It is quite simple to see people on the street, but when you start trying to use it in a beach environment, you've got people standing, you've got people sitting, you've got people lying down, you've got people in the water, or you can see this bobbing head. Is it a rock? Is it a buoy that's sitting out there? Someone's on a surfboard. All those sorts of things is, the image analytics hasn't been trained on. And so we are continuing to train our image analytics. Thanks, Adam. We're continuing to train the image analytics, and it will get better and better over time, but it was definitely not an off-the-shelf solution where we could just pluck out and get counts for the whole beach straight away. At least we had a place to start with the existing technology, but yeah, it's going to get better over time, but it is it is somewhat difficult for the machines sometimes to tell. And we also experimenting with moving imagery versus still imagery, and what quality of imagery can you get? How low of a quality can you get so that you reduce all those privacy concerns? So we have been testing trail cameras, for example, to take an image and do the count. So yeah, lower pixel levels. So yeah, that's another lesson we've learned. Don't just assume that something everyone tells you one bit of equipment works and it's going to work. It's going to work, but consider what environment you're actually trying to do stuff in and see if it's actually been applied there before. And critically, don't underestimate the time to and the challenge of integrating lots of disparate data set sources. We on this project we had lots of different data sources coming from existing data, historical data, different APIs, different sensors, different systems. Don't underestimate the time it is to get that data all into the same place, and don't underestimate the time. Our analytics guys really put it to us that, you know, you've got all these different data sets, but to get them to talk to each other and match up in a way that you can understand the patterns, there's a lot of work in cleaning up data sets and getting them to talk the same language. So don't forget that. Thank you.
Claire, thanks so much for that presentation. The virtual round of applause is significant if you can hear it. Okay, so let's go to our final case study presenter today before we head into our panel and respond to some of these questions. Michael, I am going to hand the controllers over to you. That should be coming down the pipe as we speak. And we will give you the thumbs up when we see things from your end.
Sorry, Adam, how do you change the view you're showing?
Well, if you go into presenter mode, just go down the bottom, click on presentation mode in PowerPoint, just in your PowerPoint slide there. Go down the bottom, right down the bottom.
Sorry, on the same page, here we go.
Yeah, bring that up and beautiful.
Here we go.
Yep.
We're good.
That's great.
You hear me all right?
All good. I'll get the timer going. Michael, over to you.
Great, and I'll set a timer here also. Yeah, well, thank you very much for the chance to talk. Today I'm going to talk about EQRNet, Seismic Resilience as a Service. I'm the program manager of the Smart Christchurch team. We're a small team of 4 people that have been running for about 4 years. Christchurch, for those of you who don't know, is the 2nd largest city in New Zealand in the South Island. We'll get into it. So in terms of the challenges, I suppose thinking back the last 10 years, earthquakes have been a very big part of our story in Christchurch and also in Wellington and Kaikoura. So the last 10 years has been really disruptive and challenging and expensive from an earthquakes perspective. And if we go back to the earthquakes we had in 2010 and 2011, one of the major issues we had with the traditional way of measuring an earthquake and trying to determine its effect, we'd generally look at its epicenter and then look at the direction it came from. But fundamentally, we'd look east and would say, hey, you know, that building's 20 k's east, and we'd look west and would say that building's 20 k's west. And we assumed that they had much the same effect in terms of the effect of the seismic event. The reality of the situation, however, was much different. I mean, even you can see there a building after 2011 earthquake. You can see the building to one side looks, nothing's happened to it, and the other ones fell completely. Now, we noticed this right across the city, and there's a whole bunch of things to take into account, like soil composition, the strength of the building, how old it is, materials. But fundamentally, it told us that our traditional way of assessing damage after a seismic event was not working. So in 2016, I mentioned there was a major earthquake in Kaikoura, but while it was a great distance from Wellington, which is our capital, some sensors in Wellington noted that the effect of the earthquake had quite a bigger effect than what would have been thought previously based on distance. And so a local company, Canterbury Seismic Instruments, had been doing a study and putting some of their seismic sensors into the major sensors around New Zealand. And they found in that 2016 earthquake that there were a number of buildings in Wellington that got severely damaged in terms of the stresses put on the buildings exceeded the profile of the building. And so they were quite surprised when they heard after that earthquake that there weren't any major damage. But in the months and years afterwards, a lot of the buildings that they'd identified initially actually turned out to be severely damaged and were either demolished or certainly evacuated. So they thought on the basis of that, there was an opportunity to look locally and based on the lessons from 2011, 2016, and say in Christchurch, we know that we didn't have much information to work with in a real-time event. We trialed 10 seismic sensors So this was a world first. We put them in our central business district. And in the example you can see there on screen, from an event which was centered right in the middle of our CBD, you can see a huge amount of variance throughout our CBD. So at the top of the CBD was only 4%, but in the southwest corner, there was 15% effect, and vice versa on the bottom southwest, there was 10%. So we illustrated through the exercise putting 10 sensors in that there was a lot of variance within a small area, and we thought that was worth investigating further. So the next step for us were to install 150 seismic sensors right through the region. And because of the density of buildings and people, obviously we focused our effort on the center of the city, but we also put it on the outskirts as well. In terms of where we put them, we were quite pragmatic about it. We put them in buildings, so whether it was a pump station, a new library, or a civic center, but we also put about half of them in traffic signal cabinets. Now this, for general trial purposes, is a great place to have sensors because they're protected. You've got power, and generally you've got fiber as well. So if you are looking at putting, let's say, Bluetooth sensors or some sort of remote sensors that need a bit of protection from the weather, traffic sensors or traffic boxes are a great option for that. So after we put our 150 sensors throughout the city, we also did an exercise around looking at all the major council buildings and collecting what percentage of the building code they were. You know, were they 10%? Were they 130%? Because there was a lot of variance through our building stock. And then we'd also put in local ground conditions. So fundamentally what that meant in a seismic event was that we'd take the inputs from the 150 sensors, we'd look at an individual building, its building strength, we'd look at the soil type, and then we'd calculate how it performed in context of the seismic event. So in practical terms, our building wardens get a text or an email within about 2 minutes of an event, which basically will tell them there's been no damage, there's been mild damage, there's enough of concern that you need to evacuate the building and get an official assessment, or it could be, yeah, you need to rapidly evacuate. In terms of the data that we get, as well as a high-level picture of how the seismic event has treated the individual buildings, we also get a much better sense of the effect on the CBD. And the example I've got on screen now, we've got two relatively small earthquakes, but enough that certainly wake up in the middle of the night and, you know, shake a cup of coffee. But you can see there in two relatively similar earthquakes with similar location of the center of the earthquake, we've had radically different effects throughout our CBD. And in the event since we've installed the networks, it's really validated our hypothesis that there was a lot of variance within our CBD and that the system gives us the detail we need to manage our buildings, get people out, get people into repair, get engineering assessments. In terms of other practical uses, we can also, you can see there a mock-up of an app. We're looking at making this app available to the public. So in the event of you know, a seismic situation, you can, at an instance, you could look at your kid's school, you could look at, you know, how your house may have performed at the other side of town. And we think, based on what happened nearly 10 years ago now, that when there was an event, you really needed to know if the people close to you were safe and if a building of concern, how it had performed. You know, was your house still standing? What were you going to go back home to as well? In terms of where we are now, that the network of 150 sensors has been expanded out to 200 now, and we're also looking at different types of assets. So we thought, if you can tell how a library or a swimming pool has reacted in an earthquake, why can't you look at pipes or roads or bridges? So we're really expanding the use cases for the technology. And the other thing is, as well, we're talking to, now that we've proved as a landlord that it provides a lot of value to us after an event, we're also talking to business and major government departments about how they could use this too. This is a service you could use for schools, you could use for shopping malls, and those key shopping precincts in town where there's a lot of people during the day and where you need to know if you can continue to use the building. And then taking it a step further, we thought, as it kind of alluded to, New Zealand is an incredibly active seismic hotbed, as it were. And historically, we've had earthquakes from one end of the country to the other. So we think there's a real opportunity to share this technology with other cities. So recently, Wellington, as I mentioned, the capital, they've installed 100 sensors in their traffic cabinets. So they've got on board, and we're working on other New Zealand centres and also other countries overseas as well. So like the Western Seaboard of the United States, Japan, large parts of Asia are all affected. So in terms of lessons learned, I suppose the main lesson was that we proved that you could measure an earthquake's effect in real time, and you could have better situational awareness, you could make better decisions, you could cut costs associated with seismic events, you could ensure buildings stay open. So whether it's a swimming pool, it could be the difference between 500 people standing in the rain after an event and then continuing to swim in that facility and feeling quite safe. In terms of other lessons, I kind of talked about the traffic cabinets. They were a great place to put your sensors. Pumping stations and other infrastructure are actually great places to put sensors like this in. Keeps them safe, you have a power supply, you've got fiber often. And generally, I suppose, like any smart cities trial or IoT trial, there's nothing wrong with starting small and working your way iteratively up. So we started with 10 sensors up to 150 and now up to 200. And it's, again, a low risk, low cost approach to establishing whether there's value in proceeding with the technology. And then as you can up the ante as time goes on, you've got the data to prove it. That's just about me. I think we're at the 10-minute mark. Adam, do you want to wrap it up?
Michael, fantastic. Thank you so much for that, and indeed to all four of our case study presenters today. Excuse me. So we've got some great questions here. Let's jump into them. Some are to the entire panel. Some are directed to certain speakers. I'll start at the top and head our way down. Roger's asked the question, and I think this was to John, I believe, to start with, Perth. Did you in-house all of your work, and how long to get up and running for that work that you had done in Perth, John?
Hey, Roger. We were fortunate enough to get a piece of the federal grant, so that helped us with some of the infrastructure, but obviously that was well before COVID. The sensors are literally a few minutes to set up. So all I need is a PowerPoint. Because we used LoRa, we didn't have cabling or fiber, so the install time was very quick. It usually involved me going to the coffee shop and saying, "Hi, do you mind if I chuck this under your till?" It was a pretty low-tech process. And that's one of the specs, I think. Complex tech has its own problems, but you get a much richer outcome, as Claire and David and Michael have demonstrated.
Okay.
The dashboard was real time, so as soon as we plugged something in, it flowed through. But a lot of work getting it set up to start with, but then incremental growth, as Michael has described with the seismic sensors, is much easier.
Thanks, John. We've got another one here from Richard. Did City of Perth have ideas on what data and metrics they wanted to answer before installing the sensors?
No.
Okay, thank you. Let's head over to a question, another one for you, John, from Jason. You said that you have a trigger on the sensors where if you get above or below a number, you change your response. As you learn about what works and fine-tune your understanding about that, you are probably publishing your learnings somewhere for everyone to read and think about. Are you finding the learnings are very transportable to different LGAs, or mostly quite specific and bespoke to Perth? Do you see scope for and value in a federation of data sharing between Australian cities? Ooh, okay. Over to you, John. What do you think?
Thank you. You've reminded me to talk to a point that I didn't. I'm a huge fan of federation of data and technology. So we have given several of our sensors to other councils in the Perth local area to help them manage COVID. They didn't have the tech, they didn't have the benefit of our background and all of our systems. So I literally gave them the sensor, said, here you go, here's the link to the dashboard, you're live. That's it, zero effort, zero complications. They're done, they're up, they're running. They use my dashboard. So Fremantle and Rockingham just joined on with us. So I'm a huge fan of federation and sharing and decreasing the technical debt so that we all get further down the line so much faster. So in terms of sharing and exporting, I've shared it with Adam many times. I think one of the amazing opportunities we have in smart cities is we are truly boundaryless. This chat, we're on the phone to New Zealand. These kind of chats really show that we can span across borders so easily and so quickly. And I think it's a yes. Federation of data and tech is a great upside.
Thanks for that response, John. And indeed, I can vouch for you. Certainly, very, very kind in the support and knowledge sharing you give to others in industry. So thank you again for that. Stephen has got a really good question here, kind of focused probably Claire and John, given you were part of the federal grant program. But I'll also expand it out to include all of our panelists. How have you justified the initial and also ongoing investment in these projects and solutions? For those that have received federal grants, would you have been able to fund these solutions without those grants? So let's start with those that got the grants. Claire, we'll go to you and then to John, and then David and Michael will come in and see how you guys funded your efforts as well. So Claire, do you want to kick off?
Yeah, I will. So I was part of us putting the grant in the first place, and when we were putting the grant together, obviously we added some stuff that we wouldn't have, but we had in the back of our mind, joint grant submission between Northern Beaches Council, Lake Macquarie, UTS. If we weren't to get the grant, what could we still do with a smaller amount of money available? The answer was yes, we could still have gone ahead, but at a smaller scale. So less sensors, less different types of sensors, less of the sensors. For example, perhaps not as expensive camera equipment, things like, we had a plan B if we didn't win the grant. Obviously, the grant has been a massive boost to us. It's made a big difference. It allowed us to experiment and try so many different things, and has allowed us to invest in technology and trialing things that we're still able to use now post the grant and continue the project on. With the ongoing funding and justifying it, what's seen as a really important thing, one of the key things that comes out of this sort of data and information is, understanding resourcing, how many lifeguards do we need on the beach, and at what time do they need to be there? Do we need more resources, less? And that to senior management is a really important thing, not only for keeping people safe, but just for our operations, and knowing that, confirming are we doing the right thing, or confirming actually do we need to invest more. But continuing on, it's a challenge. We're looking to expand to more and more councils and beaches, and that's not going to come without funding challenges, and we are continuing to look for other opportunities and other grants to kind of continue to give that little bit of an extra boost, particularly for supporting smaller councils going forward who don't have the resources or funding to back these sorts of programs up. And I'll echo the sharing spruiking that John is saying. We really want to create a system where everyone shares their data.
Excellent. Thanks, Claire. John, how would you respond to that question?
I agree with Claire. So it really accelerated our capability. I would think we would not have what we have now without that. We would have had a few sensors maybe in the future. We were going to do our smart irrigation system anyway. We were going to expand our video fleet anyway. We wouldn't have the Azure. We wouldn't have the back-end integration. We wouldn't have the live dashboards. We wouldn't be we wouldn't be able to manage COVID today if we didn't have that grant as effectively. We just wouldn't achieve the quantums of scale and the speed. And we certainly wouldn't have connected to this kind of community. We wouldn't be in the narrative of how do we solve different problems. And I think the grant has opened up the horizon of possibilities, not just solving Perth problems.
Yeah. Okay, good. So David and Michael, over to you guys for what you can share around how you were able to stack up, you know, the business case and the financials for your respective projects. So David, let's stay in Australia.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Yeah, for us, I think it really comes down to, I guess, the business case for each individual project. So for us, I guess rolling out smart bins, for example, that in itself allows creates service efficiencies within our collections team. So that is a way of, I guess, funding that project. In terms of public Wi-Fi, that isn't self-funded. That is a cost that we, I guess, were agreed to take on, but it's a service that we provide to the community, to our obviously to a lot of our tourists that visit our area, and we use that as a communication channel now for how we can engage with those tourists, because there's not a lot of other ways that we get to interact with them. So I guess on the one hand, it could be a funding cost initiative, or on the other hand, it could be a service improvement. And same with parking. That once again isn't self-funded, but I guess the ability for cars to easily find parking and all that in our car parks was taken as a service initiative for the community, reduces traffic congestion, makes things a bit more efficient. So I think that's how we proceeded. But in saying that, public Wi-Fi, now we are looking at how we can potentially fund that in the future through digital advertising. So there are, I guess, potential revenue opportunities down the track, even if you don't start out that way.
Yeah. Okay, David, thanks. Michael, your response.
Yeah, I completely agree with David. Each individual business case really has to stand on its own. And in the current environment, we're finding, things like, big belly bins, or, we're looking at pothole detection and graffiti recognition, are easy sells because there's a large spend. In terms of other things like free Wi-Fi, let's say digital kiosks, when your tourists have disappeared, hopefully temporarily, not too long, but it is much harder to sell. And especially something like a digital kiosk is seen as shiny and non-essential. That's a pretty hard conversation to have with your elected members in the community now. So I suppose you do have to ride the waves, economic waves and kind of perception waves. But certainly if you're spending a lot of money on something, or you have previously, like the EQI sensors, cost Christchurch $4 million a day when the centre of the city was shut 9 years ago. If it's fresh in people's minds, it's an easy sell. But as you say, if there's less tangible or direct benefits, you've got to get more creative, or be a bit more persuasive, maybe about the longer term effects. Or let's say with Wi-Fi, maybe it's more about digital inclusion and less about tourism.
Thank you everyone for those responses. Can I just get a quick kind of a thumbs up or thumbs down for yes or no? All of you here have been playing in this space, for a little while now. It's still early days. Do you feel that you're getting better? You're able to equip yourselves with the messages, the narratives, the evidence that is making that job of getting that funding and investment easier? Is it getting easier? Thumbs up or thumbs down? Have I got a bit of a temperature test? Okay. David, I'm not seeing, okay, still some work, I mean, we've all got work to do. I'm just hoping that as time goes on, as we're doing more, as we're learning more, as we're sharing more, I just would have intuitively thought that it kind of is hopefully getting easier. So kind of a little bit I'm hearing.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, it's probably not so much funding for new kind of innovative projects and things like that still has the same hurdles to overcome. We are getting, I guess, a lot more used to proof of concepts, so doing a small scale test to prove something works before expanding. So that's quite common now. But to be honest, a lot of our smart technology is just being rolled out as part of, like, when we're looking at upgrading infrastructure, it makes sense to go with smart poles or to go with smart parking meters and things like that, because the technology, that's the newest technology that's around. So it's, in a way, it's already happening without a lot of involvement by our team, but yeah, but we still have our hurdles to face.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, thanks.
yeah.
No, you go, Michael.
Well, I was going to agree with David. I think it's definitely a transition from a standalone function where you're showing off the latest shiny thing, and you can get by on the promise of what you might be able to do in the future. And it feels like the rubber's really hit the road. So you've got to be smarter. You've got to work closely with the business so you can have those BAU implementations. And I think it's really time for our promise to actualize into something tangible. So that's kind of vibe I'm getting in New Zealand. So if you're an ancillary kind of function on the edge of an organization, you could be a victim of the current situation. Whereas if you're a core partner of your business and you're helping deliver key strategic aims, then you're probably in better health.
Yeah, excellent. Excellent points, John. Okay, we've started. There's a chain reaction now around this topic. Yes, John.
I think to David's point that I've seen a risk in my organisation that we did the smart thing, and so some business unit does their own random technology, doesn't integrate, doesn't connect, uses a different protocol, doesn't share its data. So yes, I think we're going to use sensors and we're going to use new hardware. But I think part of the maturity narrative for us in the smart city practitioners is to provide constant guidance. How's it going to connect? How does it integrate? We've got one that's just like that. Maybe I can add another module and achieve that function you need. So letting the business take their head is wonderful from an engagement point of view, but there's a little message about control and efficiency there. Otherwise, we'll have a hodgepodge of widgets in our organization, which are hard to maintain and will damage our own brand.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, one and all. That's a really important conversation there around sort of the financials and business case for all this. And thank you, Stephen, for asking that. Some really good questions that I really want to power through now. Max is asking about data. A lot of the presentations around highlighting data consumption side of smart cities. He's wondering about the integration, architecture, and governance, the engineering side of your data work. Are you collaborating with internal resources dedicated to building out these networks? Are they being advised by outside experts? In either case, how are you feeling about the pace of development in your digital environment? Does someone want to pick that one up? It's a big question. Yeah, so Michael and then Claire.
Yeah, just quickly, we're working with our business intelligence team closely to make sure our data streams are coming to a central repository. So then we can, as a whole host of people, kind of use it, consume it, and we've got consistency of data. So that's a yes on that one.
Okay, Claire, what do you got?
Yeah, so we, as part of Smart Beaches, had a data lake developed in Amazon Web Services, and I was involved with that along with, we had experts at UTS developing that for us, and now that's been handed back to us at council, or I should say myself. I do have support with internal IT in terms of guidance of where they see our systems going, but it's overseen by myself at the moment. But I would say that, yeah, it's a really key thing to get all your back-end systems in place and have know how you're going to integrate with different things and have the system in place to integrate with lots of different things and get your data into the one spot. And also, as sort of echoing the conversation before, communicating with the business about what's available, and when they're starting to come down this data path, to go, hey, this is the systems we've got in place right now. We also do work with some external partners, particularly around smart features, the main example of that. We're working with a company called 3 Crowns Technologies to try and get data for all beaches in Australia, but particularly in New South Wales at the moment, and being able to have capability in the system to do that. And and although you'll find most councils probably have people in their IT departments who have the capabilities to do a lot of this work, they might not necessarily have the time. So that's always a challenge.
Yeah. Claire, while you're chatting, Mark has got a question here. Well, he kind of wants your email address, but he knows a solution that counts people in the water and assesses whether or not their heads are above water. Is that something you've looked at?
We might have come across it, but I will be interested. We were also working with, have set up a collaboration with some Japanese researchers who are using cameras to detect people going into rips. So it's not only them going under, it's actually detecting where we're
moving sideways. Yeah.
But
okay,
I'm very interested in anything that's out there.
Okay, we'll do some intros offline. Bill has asked a question generally to everyone. Much of the dashboarding and analysis appears currently to be centered around historical data. Do you see any benefits to be drawn from a move towards dealing with available data in real time? And what do you see as the challenges around that? I think most of your data was real time that I saw coming through, but John, yeah?
Yeah, real time is obviously is very, very useful. But you do need to step back and do the so whats and the therefores. We started our Wi-Fi tracking from an events management point of view, so we would support a park event or a public event. So we publish it real time, but we analyze it and make decisions historically. So there's two very different use cases. Both of them are equally necessary.
Yeah, okay. David, I think the question here says, David made mention of a move in that direction, real time.
Yeah. So I guess in terms of the response to COVID, so obviously we're updating data every 24 hours. So so it wasn't real time, but in saying that, real time is still the goal. So we are looking at now providing Wi-Fi data in real time to inform like our council rangers and the local police of how many people potentially are at the beach. And we are, I guess, like John is, we are also looking at publishing a lot of our data in real time, maybe on council's website, so that the public can then make informed decisions, whether they're driving to Bondi Junction and they want to park somewhere. If we can, I guess, show them which car parks are potentially full or I guess have low occupancy, then that can help them make these decisions. So we are looking at moving towards real-time data.
Okay, 2 more minutes to go in answering and responding to questions. We've got one here from saying, how do you manage the deployment of all these sensors? Changing batteries, failures, couple of quick words from someone. Claire, you're shaking your head. I'll go to you.
I call it sensor babysitting. So having a sort of device management system in your back end or some sort of alerting system is really critical to know, when are your batteries running low? When has the sensor gone offline? Has it come back online? We do have a few problem children which go offline for 6 hours a day and come back online randomly, things like that. It is a lot of babysitting. You've got to account for that, and you've got to account for ongoing maintenance, change of the batteries, who's responsible for the sensors, who's responsible for going out, switching the batteries in that sensor, switching the sensors out. Yeah, definitely assign responsibilities. And when you get to a large scale, you're going to have to start probably talking to your assets team, which we are starting to blend it in with your asset management schedules. It is slightly different. Your IT guys are some, they're used to managing IT assets. Assets usually don't touch the IT stuff, so there's a little bit of caution there from them. But yeah, start having the conversations early, and at minimum, yeah, just know what you've got and have someone looking at it. Don't set and forget about your sensors being out there, because you might lose data for a month and not realise that you are losing and not getting any data.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. John, quick one for you. What Wi-Fi sensors do you use?
I'm happy to provide the references. We use a really cheap and cheerful one, actually. It's a super low tech. It doesn't have a. It's just a local Perth company, bunch of startup guys, got an Arduino board, fired it up, made it work. Real low tech.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Thanks, John. Andrew, who asked that question, also is just putting a little bit of an advert out there that I will share. If anyone is looking for a tree change and wants to head to Tasmania, Launceston, they have a Smart City offer position up and running, just for note for everyone that's listening. Last question. Lovely part of the world. Last question comes from Olivia. Michael, impressive development from a scale perspective, quite mature functionality. It's big responsibility providing advice on the risk of staying or leaving a site. What has the conversion and approach to liability been? Can you summarize that in 20 seconds?
Well, you definitely get better decision-making ability in real time, but we're looking at the insurance implications and from a practical point of view, see if we can lower our premiums. But definitely in terms of defendable decision-making, it has made a big difference, but it's something we need to continue working on and educate the public on the technology as well.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Thank you for that. Thank you to everyone that asked questions, and also thank you to our 4 case study presenters. I'm just going to quickly, take back the screen, and finally, in sort of 120 seconds, wrap things up. We have a plenary morning coming up, Monday, 21 September. This is 9 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. We have an opening address by the Minister for Customer Service in New South Wales, Victor Dominello. Of course, New South Wales, under the Minister's guidance, has recently released the Smart Places strategy for New South Wales and also a smart infrastructure policy. We'll be talking on both of those and more. We then have bookending the session, Teresa Harding from the City of Ipswich, giving a final keynote at the end. And in the middle there, we've got Rebecca, Alice, Jonathan, and Di from all parts of the world, who are going to be joining a panel around measuring up and making a difference. And this is focused around, are we actually making a difference with our smart investments? And so looking forward to moderating that panel. That's about it from me, folks. Thank you so much for joining us in the first of 3 sessions of City Encounters. Just a reminder, we have business continuity coming up in about an hour's time. And later on today, we have our theme of case studies around impact, where we have 5 additional cities giving presentations. You can head to our website if you're interested in those, scwaustralia.com. That is it from the SEC ANZ HQ here in Brisbane. Claire and Michael and David and John, thank you so much for joining us today, sharing what you've done, in particular the outcomes and also the insights and lessons learned. Wishing you all a fantastic day, and hopefully we'll see you again online. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you. Bye.
See you.